Welcome, everybody, to the NFL Draft Expert Show 2014. I'm your host, Minister Jonathan Simmons, a.k.a. the Minister of Defense. And sitting right next to me is the man from Memphis, right outside of Beale Street. They call him Mr. Football, Vincent W. Turner, in the house.
How you doing, sir?
Sir, doing great.
We're going to talk about some draft today, 2014, some of the big players that's going to be in the draft. Mr. Clowney out of Rock Hill, South Carolina. Sammy Watkins out of Clemson University. Bishop Sankey out of University of Washington. This is a very deep draft.
A lot of guys here. Everybody's saying, Vince, one of the deepest drafts really in several years in the NFL.
When you look at the positions, the quarterback position has great depth. You got Johnny Manziel, Teddy Bridgewater, Blake Bortles. Then you're looking at the running back position, Jeremy Hill from LSU, Lachey Strunk from Baylor. And then I don't have to mention the wide receiver group, do I?
Looks like it's loaded.
Your man, Kevin Benjamin, probably the best receiving group since the 1996 class.
And that class was those that you mentioned before off camera. Well, look, Vince, we're going to kind of stick with the NFC South today, and then each week, guys, you can turn in and find out more about what's going on in the NFL Draft right here on the NFL Draft Expert Show. As a matter of fact, you can check us out on the web, NFLDraftExperts.net, and you can keep up with us and see all the things that we're doing and bringing the best in draft coverage. Well, as I mentioned, let's get to the NFC South. Let's start it off with a team that has had a lot of changes down in Florida, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
New head coach in Lovie Smith, coming over from Chicago, was out of the league for a year. Now he's coming back to Tampa, where he started his roots at under the great Tony Dungy.
Well, here's the thing, Vince. You look at that team, and they brought in Greg Schiano, thought he was going to do big things. He got rid of strong-arm quarterback Josh Freeman, but it didn't help. Now you've turned the team over to the unheralded Mike Glennon. Where do you think Tampa Bay is going to lean as far as the draft, offense or defense?
Well, when you look at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and what they did in free agency, and they're bringing in a coach of the magnitude of Lovie Smith who loves defense, to me it's no question about they're going to go offense. Bringing in Josh McNair, backup quarterback over there from Chicago under Jay Cutler. You're bringing in a veteran. We saw what Josh McNair did in Chicago when he had weapons, when he had the studs. Can I mention their name? Brandon Marshall and Alshon Jeffries. When he played for 3 weeks in Chicago's offense was lights out. So I'm looking at them to look at a wide receiver. My man, if I'm the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I got Vincent Jackson, one of the top 10 in the game. I'm looking to get a compliment to him, and why not get his twin, my man out of Texas A&M, Mr. Can I say his name? Michael Evans out of Texas A&M.
Michael Evans, who caught quite a few balls for Johnny Manziel, Mr. Football down at Texas A&M, and was one of the most exciting players in college football. Now, you're saying they're going to stay away from defense even though they have Lovie Smith. Some guys on the draft boards have Khalil Mack, a guy that actually is liked a lot by the Atlanta Falcons.
Well, when you look at Tampa Bay, of course, that would give Tampa Bay a lot of quality depth, but why would you take Khalil Mack when you already got one of the best backers in the game, Levante David, who last year had a lot of high numbers when we talking about forced fumbles, interceptions, and sacks. Then you got Mason Foster, a third-year guy that matured out of University of Washington. I just don't see him taking anything on defense except they're going to take a corner in the later rounds, which is the third and the fourth, and the guy that I look at, I like is Terrence Mitchell. I think he's a Lovie Smith-type player, led the University of Oregon in interceptions. So if I'm Tampa Bay and I'm looking at what Lovie Smith has did in the past, I'm taking somebody in the secondary like when I played strong safety back in the day.
Well, there you go. You got it from Mr. Football here, looking to find a replacement for the now-departed Revis Island, who Tampa Bay signed to a big contract last year, but he's one and done in Tampa Bay, so look for them to, according to you, Vince, go for offense instead of defense.
And if they're going to make any changes, if they're going to not take a wide receiver, look at them taking an offensive tackle.
There you go right there. Well, look, let's go on to the next team on the list. NFC South champion, defending 12-5 last year. Great record, one of the best defenses in the league, along with Seattle. And the return of stellar play by Cam Newton. Carolina Panthers, Vince, how do you think they'll go down the road?
Before we start talking about the Panthers' draft needs, we need to talk about a big date that's in their franchise history, which is, remember this, you can write this down, May 3rd.
May 3rd.
Because that's when Cam Newton is going to come up for extension. And the question is he going to be worth like a lot of other quarterbacks like Matt Ryan in Atlanta, Joe Flacco? Is he going to get that big deal where he's going to be boosted up for $100 million over some years?
I guess the next question is, if you do sign him for the big money, who are you going to have as far as weapons? Because we know veteran Steve Smith is gone.
Well, Steve Smith, sometimes it comes at the end of the road, and Steve Smith was a great player in the organization, but he got old. He's 35 years old. Brandon LaFleur was a consistent receiver for only one season. So he moved on, took more money for New England. I'm not going to worry about maybe adding pieces because this is a very deep receiver draft. Sammy Watkins, Kevin Benjamin, Brandon Cooks, Jordan Matthews, Dante Moncrief. If you look at overall, this is probably the best group of wide receivers since the '96 draft. When we had somebody, what's her name? Terrell Owens.
Terrell Owens.
He had a great career, right?
Yes, he did, sir.
Keyshawn Johnson did pretty well. He got a ring, right?
Talked a lot.
Musa Muhammad had a great career with the Bears in Carolina, correct?
Correct.
Amadi Tuma at your town, the New York Giants had a great career, correct? I didn't even mention my man that did it down there in Who Dat Nation, Mr. Joe Horn.
Yes, sir.
So I'm looking at this class being just as better overall because you look at down Devontae Adams. I ain't mentioned about him from Fresno State. I'm going to name some second-tier guys. Ryan Grant out of Tulane is a pretty good player. Dan Herron out of the University of Wyoming is a pretty good player. We can go down the list. You're going to find quality receivers in this draft that's going to make a contribution. Now, I didn't even mention the guy who's moving up the draft boards. Remember this name, my man out of L.A., California, Mr. Paul Richardson out of Colorado University, who averaged almost 30 yards in reception.
Well, they're going to have to do something at that wide receiver corps because you can't have a guy like Cam Newton, big arm, great legs, and a guy that's shown with the right situation can be a Pro Bowl quarterback. A lot of guys on the draft board are looking to hope, if you're in Carolina, that the wonderful wide receiver from LSU, Jarvis Landry, will drop all the way down. But I think, Vince, he's climbing up the charts also, so he might be gone.
Well, Jarvis Landry is an excellent football player, but if I'm looking at Carolina, I'm looking at a perfect fit. I'm taking his partner, Mr. Odell Beckham Jr. I think it's a more quality football player. He made All-SEC as receiver and kick returner. Plus, his mother was an All-American track star at LSU. So Odell Beckham, to me, would be a perfect fit in Carolina. Then if they want to move down the rounds later and take another receiver, let's say in the third or fourth round, I'm taking a young man that a lot of people are sleeping on. He played at the University of Ole Miss. Didn't have great quarterback play. Remember this name out there for his fans. He's 6'2", 220 pounds. Did his thing last year, had a better season as a sophomore, Mr. Dante Moncrief.
Look, under the radar, guys, good information here from Mr. Football telling you who to look for in this NFL draft, because you're telling me, if you're a GM, you're looking for bargains right now, not necessarily a marquee player.
No, I'm looking for the best player, and I think Carolina, when you look at Carolina, a lot of people are saying, well, Cam is not going to have a veteran receiver, but I'm saying this receiving class, you got some studs that are going to be able to come in and contribute. When you're talking about size, you're talking about ability, you're talking about speed. You got Brandon Cooks, who was the fastest player out of Oregon State at the Combine. If you want to go size, you're going with Kevin Benjamin, big guy, 6'5", 234. You look at the guy over at Vanderbilt, Jerry Rice, first cousin, Jordan Matthews, another size receiver. Then if you want to move down, I didn't even mention this, who I think is the best player, one of the best players in the draft, my man, out of the mighty USC Trojans, love out there to the West Coast, Mr. Marquise Lee. So the receiving core is going to be fine. Even matter of fact, I get a wide receiving grade, the position at grade A in this draft.
Oh, there's no question. Everybody's talking about the depth of the wide receiver position. So whoever Carolina picks up, they're going to get a stud player to go. Well, of course, now here in Atlanta, everybody wants to know about our arch nemesis, the Who Dat Nation, the New Orleans Saints, coming off again another playoff run, knocked out by the eventual Super Bowl champions, the Seattle Seahawks. And now the question is, where do they go? They have talked about they're getting with the Sproles, a guy that's over 70 receptions. He's gone. And so now the question is, what are you going to do to help Drew Brees? Because he got sacked more times last year than he has since he's been a New Orleans Saints. What do you do?
Well, I think if you look at the Saints' history, I think they're going to be fine now. They started a young man out of UAP, Arkansas, Pine Bluff, and Teron Armstead that played pretty well for him at the end of the year. If they're going to move down, probably take a lineman. I'm looking at them taking maybe somebody in the third round. Antonio Richardson, nicknamed Tiny, out of the University of Tennessee, will be a perfect fit. But when I'm looking at New Orleans last year, they made so much a change defensively.
Right.
Rod Ryan changed that team, and that's why the Saints made the playoffs. They ended up cutting veteran Will Smith in the offseason in February. I'm looking at them to take the blueprint what the Seattle Seahawks done, get them a lot of pass rushers. And two guys that fit perfectly in their system is Colin Ely, the young man out of Missouri, who they say is the second best defensive end behind, you know who, I'm going to call him Mr. Clowney today. And also another guy that's a Rob Ryan type player is Trent Murphy out of Stanford. Can we say what? Stanford University?
Brainiac U.
Yes, sir. So that's why I'm looking at New Orleans first going with their first pick. Then in the second round, we know Drew Brees like new toys. Look what they did last year when they got Kenny Stills, fifth round out of Oklahoma. He led the teams in reception per yard, is 20 yards per reception. I tell you a guy who I think will fit perfectly in their system, Allen Robinson, wide receiver out of Penn State. was a phenomenal player under Bill O'Brien, who's now the head man with the Houston Texans. This is a guy, another very underrated receiver that I didn't mention about, had over 1,400 yards last year, and to me, the best receiver to come out of Penn State University since the days of Bobby Ingram, Kenny Jackson, and the great O.J. Mathuphy.
Well, listen, folks, as you can see, lots of depth in the wide receiver position, and this draft is stacking up the way all the pundits are talking about to be one of the best in all time. Well, listen, we have more draft information, draft talk here, right here on NFL Draft Experts. You're listening to, of course, your lead host, Minister Jonathan Simmons, a.k.a. the Minister of Defense, and the man from Memphis himself, Mr. Football, Vincent W. Turner. Listen, keep it locked for more right here. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with more 2014 NFL Draft Experts in just a moment.